As I said, here we are tonight on Victoria Supports Change. We've got the opportunity to become the world's leader. That's right, the world's leader in the hemp seed industry, because we can dual purpose that industry and give it the stimulus it needs to get on par to the international market that exists for these seeds. Right now, the waste from the hemp seed industry is ploughed into the soil. Okay, there's not really a huge amount of it because up until November last year, hemp seeds weren't allowed to be sold as a food source in Australia for human beings. That's changed. The hemp crops this year are much larger. Still not phenomenally so, because it's coming down to infrastructure and how much seed they can process and so forth. Because there is no infrastructure, there's been no big investment into the industries until November. And the first thing you saw was a mining company come into it. And most people would go, why would a mining company want to get into that? Well, I'll tell you something. There's a reason. If they dominate the hemp seed industry, which means they can dominate the waste from the hemp seed industry, and they can stop it becoming what it has the potential to be, which is renewable energy, renewable electricity at a reasonable price, cheaper than coal. How's that? That's right. No subsidies, reasonably priced electricity, agriculturally sourced, renewable, 100% recycle, like renewable, clean burning, all of that. How do we do it? Well, as a matter of fact, I'm glad you asked, because here in Victoria we have the opportunity to actually do this and to make it happen and to make it real really quickly. We've got power stations that they're looking at shutting down, and one they already have, so we've got some infrastructure lying around. Okay, now that infrastructure, or not so much the coal turbines, but the gas turbines that they have at the power stations, can have the seals changed. It's a very, very simple retrofitting, and it's basically down to changing seals so that it can handle running methanol, ethanol. Okay, so once those seals are changed, that power station can run methanol, ethanol through the system that was meant to be running LPG. Now that's a very, very important fact to remember, because it means existing infrastructure. It means using what we have right now in place that they're telling you that we have to shut down and destroy. Those things in place can be used to generate clean electricity. Now imagine the savings when you start looking at that. And when people tell you it's not feasible and it can't be done, tell them to go and look at Israel, where they've had that system in operation for 15 years, running baseload electricity. So it's not only possible, it's not only feasible, it's practical and dependable. 15 years the system's been running. Okay? So, that's just a little factoid there for you as we move forwards with this, because there's a lot of different components into making this a reality here in Victoria for Victoria. Hazelwood, exactly, okay? They've got gas turbines. It's part of the structures that are there. Now, they can be converted to run the methanol, ethanol, and all it is, it's changing seals. It's a very simple retrofitting. As I said, it was done over 15 years ago in Israel. The system's been up in operations for 15 years. The exact same systems that we have here in Australia, just converted over for the fuel. Very simple, not an expensive retrofitting whatsoever. It's just the fuel is a little bit more corrosive, so they have to change the seals where things come together. Okay? Now, how do we get to the point where we're going to have enough mass, enough feedstock? Because what happens when you start to look at biomass and biofuels, you come into one or two little hurdles that have been discovered. One, the primary one, okay, the one that everyone's going to put first on the table when you want to start talking about biofuel in large quantities. They're going to go, oh yeah, mate, do you know what the food versus fuel debate is? That's, using the resources to grow fuel when you could be growing food. Or even worse, growing a food crop and then selling it for more money as fuel, thereby starving the food market, messing with the price of food. Well, it's true. That's what happens in those cases. However, in this case, what we're talking about is a second generation biofuel. Okay? Yes, I am a cannabis enthusiast and user. Please do not allow that to alter your perception of what I'm saying, because everything I'm going to say to you and have been saying to you, you can go away and you can verify. These things are not just the delusions of a stoner. This is probably about 16 months worth of research. Some of the I'll share with you this evening. And it's important that we actually get the information out there before it gets external hard drives. You know how it is. People try and get your data. Nobody getting my data, baby. Okay, so once again, a second generation biofuel, which basically means it is not the primary purpose of the crop to create the biofuel. Because what we're talking about is the hemp seed industry. So obviously the primary crop here is the grain seed, the hemp seed, for the grain market. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to put on the table the canola industry. Now canola is grown, 30% of the Australian canola crops are grown here in Australia. The rest are primarily up in Western Australia. There's a couple scattered here and there, but that's two big pockets of canola, and it's Western Australia and it's Victoria. That crop, previously known as rapeseed, that's right, rapeseed canola, doesn't sound as, it's like canola sounds ever so much sweeter than going on some, give you a massage with some rapeseed. Do you want your chips in rapeseed? No. Canola? Oh, that sounds very lovely. Canola is disgusting. It's a genetically modified crop. It actually, here in Australia, its cropping involves 4 chemicals, 4 herbicide pesticides that are actually banned throughout the entire European Union. So you can't use them in any way, shape or form in places like Germany, France, England, you know, any of those European civilized countries. You can't actually use these chemicals, but here in Australia, we use them. We use them in Victoria and we use them in Western Australia on the canola crops. Horrible stuff. The farmers can't go near their fields for 4 days after spraying. Doesn't sound healthy, does it? No, because they're gene mutators, okay? So they actually start to mess with your endocrine system. They get into the waters. Look, terrible stuff. Good news for the canola farmers, right? One of the other negatives of canola is that it doesn't bring a large gate price per tonne. In fact, it's tiny in comparison to the tonnage price for hemp seed, of which there is a greater quantity per hectare. Okay, so you're getting where I'm going here. So what we've got is we've got a canola industry. So what have we got? When we're talking about a canola industry, what are we talking about here? We're talking about infrastructure or rural infrastructure. So like irrigation. Okay, infrastructure is in tractors and equipment, harvesting. Okay, you've got land. You've got ways of harvesting the land. You've got ways of getting the cropping out there. So that's a rural infrastructure that's existing right now. It's huge, but it's canola and it's a dirty crop. So if we can convince and to assist, and I'll go into the finances of it. I actually have the finances squared. There's a $200 billion pocket of money, okay, called the Emissions Reduction Fund. It's over 200 billion, but it's there for actually creating renewable energy options. That's exactly what this is. So we actually have free access to shitloads, like we're talking like $500 million. We need that. We could use that. Not only could we use it, we could pay it back. Yes, that's right. We could actually access that funding on an understanding is that we'd actually put the money back there so that other renewable opportunities could be looked at. That's right. That's how well balanced the financial possibilities of this canola plan are. Because once you've got that acreage, and I think we're looking at about 486,000 hectares or roundabout. I'm only going rough off my head. It's been a while since I've looked at the figures. In Victoria, converted to hemp seed, the farmers get a better gate price straight off the bat for their actual grain crop. So the grain market is still getting a large grain supply. It's not the canola grain. So the market is going to shift a little, but there's a huge market for the hemp seed. There's no gluts possibility because it has so many different markets that are actually wanting it. It's international, as domestic alone is huge. The amount of hemp seed we're importing from China and from Tasmania and so forth is phenomenal because there's big crops in Tassie. That's where we get most of our edible stuff from, the hemp seed ones. Well, you see, there's plenty of cash here, Brian. This is one of the things. Like a lot of people, they'd probably be surprised to realise that we don't really have an energy sector in Australia. That's the reality of it. What we have is the marketing departments of the fossil fuel industries. Okay, so coal and gas. All right, so their marketing department looks for different markets for coal and gas, and it'll package it any way it can. So it's selling us coal and gas, but then it's selling us electricity because it owns the power stations, it owns the fuel, right? But it's not really selling us electricity. What it's doing is it's selling us coal and gas packaged as electricity. And if they can't package the coal and the gas as electricity, then they're not willing to give us electricity. There's nothing in it for them. There's no incentive. They're not looking to sell us electricity. They're not looking to create electricity. What they're looking to do is to sell their coal and to sell their gas. And if we'll buy it as electricity, they'll make electricity and they'll sell it to us. But if we won't buy electricity made of coal and gas, then the money people behind the electricity supply right now are not interested in actually supplying electricity, which is why Australia's chief scientist pointed out in his last report that there's no infrastructure in place for renewables in Australia whatsoever, and there's no plans beyond 2020 at all. And there's nothing on the table now, so after 2020 there's less than nothing. And that was Finkel? Right? That was him, Australia's chief scientist. He's going, how come nobody's doing anything? He's not saying, oh, this is why. Nobody's telling you this is why we're not getting renewables. Nobody's telling you this is why nothing's happening. And everything's expensive and it's not feasible. It's very, very feasible. As a matter of fact, this plan that I'm discussing right now is so feasible that if we could convert the canola over to hemp seed and use the waste from that, convert it to biomethanol, ethanol, we can provide 70% of Victoria's total energy needs, right? At the moment, that what we're using right now, we can actually supply 70% of Victoria's entire energy needs from this renewable energy plan. So that would be 70% of the state's entire energy usage would be from a renewable, which would equate to Australia meeting its emissions reduction target for the first time, purely on the back of Victoria's electricity. We can do that. And it's not that difficult because the technology's out there. They know the economic viability of using ethanol and methanol in these systems. As a matter of fact, I've got international accountancy companies that have done the numbers for Australia for providing electricity from biomethanol, ethanol. However, they are put together by the actual energy companies because there's a process that they can take where they put LPG through a cleaning process and creating a methanol, ethanol. All right, so they can actually clean it. But the thing is, the process is so dirty that no matter that that's methanol coming out of it, which does burn clean, the process of making that is so filthy that you're not actually getting any emissions reductions. However, they've done the maths on providing electricity from that because, once again, they're not worried about the dirt. They're worried about selling their product, which is gas or coal. Right? Now, this is a plan that they've got to sell you gas as clean fuel. Oh, we're going to turn it into methanol and ethanol, and then you can burn that. And they've done all the figures, and they've shown that it's viable and it works and that we can do it. That's great, except for the process of making it from LPG. So how about we take that process aside? How about we go, oh, look, there's the economics that show that we can make electricity without subsidy from an LPG like methanol, ethanol, without any dramas at all. And you go, excellent, if only we could do that without that dirty process. Well, we can, because that very, very same ethanol, methanol can be made from a bio process. That's right, a distillation. It's a cellulosic process which basically it distills. So you're actually getting, it's like a home still, but it's on mad scales. And it creates methanol and ethanol, or biomethanol, ethanol. That then can be used once again through the LPG or the gas turbines in the power plants, which will produce electricity through that dirty old system, but it'll be clean. Hi Jasmine, how are you? clean fuel from a renewable source. Okay, so no dirty process to make it, an actual clean renewable source. One of the other benefits of having these plants made is spill off electricity, okay, which can be then used and diverted to the farms, and with the help of this emissions reduction fund, the stimulus packages that we'll be bringing in here to bring the canola farmers over to hemp seed, we will be building infrastructure for value adding to the seed, dehulling systems out where the farms are. So the farm gate price suddenly increases again. So the farmers of Victoria are making more money. Not only that, there's jobs at the farm for the local kids, right? And not just the kids, the adults, the parents. All of a sudden, we're starting to see the rural economy of Victoria starting to thrive. And we're not even talking about wholesale regulation of cannabis or anything. We're talking about the byproduct of the hemp seed industry. Something that right now is being wasted by being ploughed into the fields. Right? That's the reality. It could be providing electricity. And if, as I said, if we can convert the Victorian canola farmers over to hemp seed, their gate price is better. We can actually do transition loan packages using the emissions reduction fund financing. Okay? Not only that, there's this whole secondary financial benefit to this. There's something that they call a large-scale generation certificate. Now, one of those is issued every time a megawatt of renewable fucking energy is produced. Okay, so we're talking about lots and lots and lots of them, thousands of them actually. The weird thing is they trade. Their present market value is about $85 each. Now that is issued by the government for the megawatt of power that has been paid for, sold, right, and the money earned on it already. That extra $85 for that megawatt is free. It's added bonus. Now that there, those large-scale generation certificates, they actually feed into the finances of this entire plan. This is why it makes it so simple, because these certificates are there. The government not only is issuing them, the government's buying them back, because the government uses so much electricity that it actually has to buy these certificates in to show that they're doing their bit for renewables. So that's where we get to actually pay the government back for the stimulus packages that we're going to ask out of the actual thing. Now, even though that emissions reduction fund, it's not a loan thing. That's actually like, here, have chunks of money to make the shit work so that the big boys can go and take bits. What we're talking about doing is creating a whole new agricultural based industry, borrowing money from that fund and repaying it in large-scale energy generation certificates so that the government, we don't have to buy them, right, which they're already doing. Okay, so they cycle around. I can actually take you through any aspect of this plan and show you the financial viability of it, but it is something that is so vast that it can't all be just done in one little delivery like this, because it's complex. It was talking about 1.5 years of maths and research to see that everything bounced in the right direction. Down to when you're making the ethanol methanol. Usually when you're making a fuel like that, it then goes and becomes classed and counted into the international fuel production market, which has a volatility of price, right? And that's why they regulate barrel prices and the flow from all of that over in Saudis and stuff like that. I want, like, this stuff, because it is actually going to be purely and simply for the generation of clean electricity here in Australia. I came up with a sort of a quarantine sort of program, so that it's excluded from the international market, therefore there's no volatility, which maintains a steady electricity price. So you're not looking at ups and downs, you're actually looking at a set supply price, because it's all actually coming under what I developed as the Priority Resource Development Initiative, or the PRDI, because it's a PRDI plan, in order to actually get us on the track, because it's about doing this in a manner that's viable. We don't want the people at home being out of pocket. The benefit of this is that you're actually going to be spending less money on electricity. It's not going to cost as much to produce, and I don't really see a need for the electricity to be going from the producer through through somebody else who's going to actually add no value but add huge costs and profits. So, we'd love to streamline the delivery of the electricity, which will also be possible. Because this is actually going to be owned by the agriculture. It's going to be owned by, the thing is, this industry doesn't exist, right? This is something from scratch, right? We're talking about building the hemp seed industry to the level where it's going to be in 10 years' time, but doing it in 2. The same, you know, like getting to where the level where Canada is, because Canada's just, they've gone from making this huge little amount of money to this like mega billions on hemp seed. And we can get up there because we've got better land, we've got better quality sort of potential to go forwards with this. Not only that, we have a plan in place to use the waste from this industry for a renewable fuel. A fuel that's going to give Australia energy security. And what happens when you have energy security? You have investment because industry wants to come. If you've got electricity, it's clean, especially in today's green world where everyone's, you know, trying to get out of having to pay the carbon debts and taxes and stuff like that. What bigger incentive could we have for industries to come to Australia? However, there'd be a difference than now, is that we'd expect them to pay some tax. But what better incentive could we have to bring industry to Australia than to be able to provide clean electricity so that they're not actually building up huge carbon debts in their manufacturing processes? You know, isn't that just the logic of that fairly simple in itself? I mean, even down to putting that technology into like once we start in this renewable pathway, once we actually get into that focused direction, we're going to see other technologies, battery technologies advancing as well. Once you see battery technologies advancing, then you're starting to see vehicle technologies advancing. You're also looking at vehicles that can go on the road, you know, cheap, economical, environmentally friendly vehicles designed and developed here in Australia in environmentally friendly factories on environmentally friendly fuel, electricity. You know what I mean? Can you see a little bit of the potential that lays before us if we grasp? And I'm not talking about saying we're not going to use coal anymore or anything like that. I've got nothing against the mining industry other than the fact that it's dirty as shit, and I grew up near a mine, on a mine. Lost my dad to a mine. But, you know, I come from the labour in, like, more ways, won't go into that. However, I'm not against, like, there's a lot of jobs there, and we've got a big export market. I don't want to see that interfered with at all. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the generation of electricity here in Australia, something that has become a priority, both nationally and globally. Electricity generation, because it's happening 24/7 globally around the world. So there has to be some clean way of doing it, because if anything is polluting the environment, it's going to be the electricity generation, because we use so much of it and it's constant. Okay? So this plan, as I said, viability, using existing infrastructure, proven technology, proven mathematics, like economic mathematics that have been done by their guys. Not me, not like, you know, sort of, you know, greenies, because I'm far from it, but talking about the viabilities of it from outside perspective. All the information was there. It just had never been looked at with a secured feedstock that was classified as second generation, not at the volume. This comes down to, you know, like the economic overview that I have for a biofuel, for production of electricity, only puts down one problem: locking in the feedstock. This plan is all around a feedstock and trying to find something to do with it. So it was the perfect fit. You know? And I'm happy to go into as I said, happy to go into the details of it with anyone that is actually in the industry that would like to talk about it, that wants to get involved in actually helping this move to the next stage. Because it is something that is huge. I mean, it's electricity. It's something that we take for granted and have done for generations, and yet it's become, you know, this huge thing that we've got to find some way of producing it cleaner. I've done that. I mean, you know, like, okay, no, I did that. Go figure. So look, this is part 1 of the canola plan. Hemp seed, baby. And it was just basically a live introduction to Victoria Supports Change. I want to thank those of you that popped in, those of you that come back later. Feel free to reach out, to connect, to email, to message. We are here to work with fellow Victorians to move us forwards well before this election comes. Let's get some good quality people standing up for the people of Victoria that have got a bit of vision for the future of Victoria and actually want to see Victoria become the leading light of this country when it comes down to logic and people first governance. You know, let's clean house and let's start afresh. We can do this, Victorians. Together we can do this. And I'd like to invite all of you to participate. Thank you. Thank you for joining, and I hope to see you again real soon. Have a great night.